Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. On Thursday, the board that oversees North Carolina's public universities is expected to repeal diversity policies across the UNC system. The efforts come amid a broader backlash in conservative circles against affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the country. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran has been looking into these programs, what they do, how much they cost, and where DEI money might go if they're shut down. Will, good to see you again.
You too.
Now, before we dive into the politics part of this, just give us a quick breakdown of what DEI is in the context of the university system. What do these programs do?
Sure. So most people probably know DEI from HR trainings, that maybe your company, requires employees to go to. And those trainings exist in universities as well. But the programs are more than just that in universities. And really, each campus has a lot of leeway to determine exactly how they're going to address DEI on their campus. But, it can include things like at UNC Chapel Hill, the DEI office hosts an annual Martin Luther King celebration. At NC State, the DEI office runs the Women's Center, the Black Student Alliance, LGBTQ Center. A lot of universities, actually, their LGBTQ offerings are rolled into the DEI office. So, some people might hear DEI and think race and ethnicity, and yes, those are issues that DEI offices address, but it's more than just that. It's gender diversity, religious diversity, things like that.
Now, the UNC Board of Governors wants to do away with these programs. Why?
Well, it's political, and there has been this national pushback against DEI, and there's been a lot of frustration among conservatives with some of these training programs. And also, specifically at universities, you hear concerns that these programs and the people involved in them are pushing political views on students, that they are indoctrinating them, is the word that we hear from Republican politicians at the legislature a lot, into certain beliefs about things like white guilt, systemic racism, issues like that. And they don't think that that is appropriate for universities to do. And so now there is this effort to get rid of this policy and replace it with a new diversity policy.
Now, what might that new diversity policy look like?
It would be much more vague than the current one. And instead of, being pro-diversity, which is kind of the stance of the current policy, it would say that, everything needs to be content neutral, that, you can't necessarily advocate for or against any certain people or beliefs or things like that. And, that universities need to make sure that they don't have any staff or programs who are engaged in political or social advocacy.
Now, the people who are in favor of these programs or even run these programs, what do they tell you?
They don't. I have reached out to a whole lot of people, both in universities and outside, people who are just private researchers who look into DEI and diversity efforts like this, not just in higher ed, but across the board. And all of them have either declined to do interviews about this or have just ignored the interview requests. And I think that probably speaks to how political this is. People are a little cautious, especially if their job might be on the line here, to kind of get out and be a public face of this thing that is clearly pretty unpopular with the people who are in charge here in North Carolina.
And what do students have to say?
So students are broadly in favor of these sorts of things. And we spoke with Julia Taylor, who's the student body president at UNC Chapel Hill. She's a Black woman, and she said that as a Black woman, I'm really appreciative of DEI programs. That's something we've heard a lot from other students. And it's not just minority students who feel like this. I actually went and found a survey that Chapel Hill sends to all of its incoming freshman class. And the incoming freshman class, I believe, is close to 90% white or Asian students, about 8% Black. But of the whole class, over 90% said, we are in favor of diversity and we would like more opportunities when we come to college to interact with people who aren't from the same kind of community that we grew up in. So, a lot of kids who are going to college are excited for, the chance to be in a new place with, new experiences, new types of people that they might not have seen growing up, no matter what their background is.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about how money once earmarked for DEI programs might be spent in the future. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at North Carolina universities. Will, this isn't the first time state officials have targeted diversity at universities, right?
That is correct. At the legislature, there was a new law that passed last year, basically based on a program at the UNC School of Medicine that had said that, if employees wanted to get promotions or if people wanted to get hired there in the first place, they had to affirm some pro-diversity policies. And then, for getting promotions, part of your annual review could be things like, did you mentor a minority colleague or student? Did you, I think one was like, take part in a book club that touched on racial issues? So, it's kind of a, post George Floyd Black Lives Matter effort to get the med school faculty, a little bit more woke, some critics might say. And there were a lot of critics. It reached the legislature and they passed a new law that banned exactly that sort of thing, not just at the UNC School of Medicine, but everywhere. All public universities and all state agencies are now banned from asking either current employees or potential new hires to affirm any sort of pro-diversity or any other political stance. We heard from state lawmakers who said that this isn't necessarily just an attack on diversity, even though that's kind of how it began. They said they don't think, people should be asked to opine on any sort of, current issue, social issue, political issue in order to have a job.
Now, North Carolina isn't alone in this anti-DEI push. There are other states that are proposing similar policies, right?
That's correct. Basically any red state in the country you look at is going to be talking about similar policies. There's a push at Florida in their university systems that people here in North Carolina have told me that they think actually the policy being proposed here in North Carolina is maybe not as aggressive as the one in Florida. That is just basically a wholesale elimination of DEI there very explicitly. It seems that the one they're talking about here has maybe a little bit more wiggle room, but that is still an open question since it hasn't passed yet.
Now, here in North Carolina, there are hundreds of people who work on DEI programs in the state's public universities. What happens to them if this policy change is passed?
That's another great question that nobody is prepared to give an answer to right now. I've spent days trying to run this down, and both the UNC system and the individual universities have all kind of pumped the brakes and said, look, this hasn't even passed yet. We don't necessarily want to start predicting what's going to happen. But assuming that it does pass, people are probably going to lose their jobs. The policy that the board is going to be considering on Thursday doesn't explicitly call for firing people, but it does say, university chancellors, when you fire people, tell us how much money you saved and what you're doing with that money.
And what happens with these programs? What are the individual universities planning?
So kind of similar to the uncertainty around jobs, you might see jobs eliminated, but you might also see jobs that just have their job description and their duties changed. Same thing with the programs. You could see some programs and events completely eliminated. You could also see others that just have, a change to their mission, change to their title, maybe some changes, to staffing or, what part of the university it's put in. But really just, again, the same theme here. There's not a whole lot of details on what this will actually do. And some people, even people who are critics of this change, might see a silver lining there because this is not necessarily the Board of Governors dictating to every single university exactly what they have to do. A lot of it is going to be up to the individual leadership at each campus to kind of determine how to, put these new changes into place.
Now, we got a little bit of a glimpse last week when the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's Board of Trustees, they made a key vote. What did they decide and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, so they got out ahead of the Board of Governors for the system, and they said, okay, here at Chapel Hill, we are just going to recommend that we totally eliminate all of DEI, take 100% of the funding and put it into basically campus police. And, so that would include, not only the funding for the staffing, but also programs that Chapel Hill has. Like there's part of the DEI outreach is a a website that highlights locations around campus that are significant for Black history. Another part of it is a program that encourages new doctors to basically move to rural North Carolina and become primary care physicians after they graduate. Plenty of stuff in between, which kind of shows the depth of DEI offerings. But they said just cut 100% of it, stick it to the police. Now, there are some questions about whether or not that will even be allowed under this new policy that the Board of Governors is going to approve, because it says that any savings that you get have to be put towards student, essentially academic success or mental health care well-being. Now, you could maybe make an argument that public safety is included in that, and maybe some people will, but I think there are still unanswered concerns about what the Chapel Hill Board of Trustees voted to do is actually going to be allowed under this new policy. And a university's budget is ultimately up to the chancellor. Now, the chancellor can be fired by the Board of Trustees, so there's a little bit of give and take there, of course. But while Chapel Hill is the flagship school for the university system, just because its leadership is kind of proposing a wholesale 100% cut to DEI programs doesn't necessarily mean that every university is going to follow that same path. They could. We should note the Board of Governors, each campus Board of Trustees is heavily influenced by the Republican-led state legislature. The members are largely appointed by Republican legislative leaders. They are largely Republican politicians and lobbyists and donors themselves. So there's not a whole lot of distance between the legislature and these campus leaders. So we could see a lot of campuses do exactly what Chapel Hill did and just call for a total slashing of all of the funding. But that's not necessarily a given. We could see some more nuanced approaches by some other schools.
Now, what are we expecting this week with this vote? What's that going to look like?
It will likely be very short and probably actually no debate at the meeting. It's, if we want to get technical, it's part of the consent agenda, which anyone who's covered a local government or a school meeting in the past knows. The consent agenda is just the kind of stuff that they say, okay, we've got a bunch of stuff. Do people like it? Anyone have any objections? And then usually people all vote yes, and it gets passed with no debate. Of course, maybe someone will object to it. Maybe someone will want to talk about it. But we are expecting there to not be any debate. This is just going to happen quickly and quietly, and then they're going to move on to other stuff and just kind of leave the fallout for the next coming weeks.
Well, we know you'll be watching. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran. For his in-depth look at the UNC System's diversity programs, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.